Subscribe, or it will find you in your sleep.
My wife and I were staying with her sister for the night. The kids had gone to our parents' house, and having been married with children, we had no friends. So we were hanging with her sister, we're getting ready for bed, and my wife and I were fighting over a single sink as we were brushing our teeth. The door to the hallway was open, and I'm staring at myself in the mirror as I brush away. I then see my sister-in-law walk past me, wearing a white skirt and pants, not 3 feet away from me, mind you, and go down the hallway towards the living room and the kitchen. Now, the layout of this house means that anyone and everyone needs to go down this hallway by the bathroom to move between the bedrooms and the kitchen and the living room. So, knowing that my sister-in-law had traveled that way, and being kind of a dick, I figured I could sneak up on her and scare the crap out of her. So I leave the bathroom and head on down towards the living room. No one is in the living room, so I head sneakily towards the kitchen, knowing that this is the only room she could be in. I jump yelling loudly out in the kitchen, and there's no one there. The only other place she could have gone is out into the garage, so knowing my yell would have either alerted her. I walk over to the garage and notice that the deadbolt is still engaged. I turn the lock open and close it again, pondering what the hell is going on. Just as I'm doing so, a hand touches my back and I nearly shit my pants. Turning around so violently, I nearly punch my wife in the face. She tells me that she's sorry that she scared me, and it only serves me right for locking her sister in the garage. She assumed that by locking and unlocking the deadbolt was me trying to lock her in. I tell her that her sister is not in the garage, but she doesn't believe me because I'm kind of a dick sometimes. So she opens the garage only to find it pitch black. She looks at me puzzled and says that she saw her walk past me and down the hallway in her white shirt and pants, and I tell her that's what I saw too. Both of us walk back to the kitchen. The hallway is completely dark, except for some light coming out from under the door at the end of the hall. We start walking back slowly up the hallway and nearly shit ourselves as her sister opens the door wearing all black. Later that year at Christmas, my wife's parents hear our story and start laughing. They tell us about a dozen stories about the lady in a white dress that they've seen again and again, and I have not stayed there since. Last night I was in my kitchen alone and just making myself something to eat around 3 a.m. or so when I could feel that there was something near or around me. Whilst pouring myself a drink, I noticed some sort of dark shadow quickly disappear around the wall, which had a little mirror cabinet in the corner so I can see right around that wall. And of course, there's nothing there. And at this point, I can feel something tug at my shirt collar and the hair on my neck stands up on edge. So I quickly finish making what I have and get back to my room ASAP. I know for a fact that I am the only person awake as my sisters are asleep and my brother is out. Mom at work and dad asleep in his room. So any and all noises I heard outside my room were definitely not any of them. I've listened to a lot of stories on here, and half the time I think that it might be just my mind playing tricks on me. But at this point, I know that something is causing me to feel uneasy about the kitchen, or at least being in that part of the house alone. So after a couple of minutes, I went to put my plate away and basically received confirmation that there is something here. I have a weird paranoia about stuff. So I will always check to make sure that the balcony door is closed and locked, that there is no excess stuff plugged into outlets, that the fan and lights in the living rooms are off, that the sink isn't on, and that the stove dials are off. And I turn them slightly just to check to make sure they're in position. Then last, I check to see that all the bolts on the lock and the main door are locked. Just before I went into my room with the plate, I did all 5 and then went to eat. Once I came out not long after, I felt the same feeling again and quickly washed my plate and glass. But then what I saw confirmed it all. In the living room, we have this little cabinet with boxes in it that slide out for storage purposes. At the time, it was completely filled, and there is no way anyone could have moved it without making a noise. And I need to just reiterate, no one has ever moved this since we put it on the exact spot where it sits. But as I walked back to my room, I turned around in horror and saw that it was sitting about a foot towards from the wall. Now, had anyone moved it forward to grab something that may have fallen behind it, they would have obviously put it back right away because my mother would have flipped out. And to be honest, now that I think about it, you can't really drop anything behind the cabinet to begin with, as the entire cabinet is squared off and everything would be contained inside. But as I moved it back, I looked around to see if anyone was awake. But no, I turned back and go through my 5 steps again. And the first thing I noticed is that the balcony door is slightly open, and that the latch is in the upward position, meaning that it's unlocked. I have never seen anyone in the house just leave it in that way. and there's no way that handle could have just moved itself upwards, fighting gravity. This confirmed that something is in the house. I sweeped every single run and found no one, so I was sure there was no intruder and I left no spot for them to hide. This is only just the start of something even creepier happened to me the next morning. I had decided to go check the post downstairs as I got ready. As I stepped outside, the light right above me started to flicker. I know that's cheesy as shit, but I still got that uneasy feeling. So I knew it might not just be the bulb that's about to go, which, by the way, would a bulb just go dimmer and then stop working rather than flicker? Huh? Anyway, I always look around as I walk down the hall, and I noticed that the stairwell door was shut fully. The apartment in front of mine and all the others along the hallway were also shut fully. And I thought, now this is the perfect time to get a video of all of this. So I turned around and started to record. Then, well, you can hear for yourself. No wind in the hallway, no doors that needed to be closed. And on these floors, you can't hear what's going on the other floors. These doors are pretty heavy, so no gust of wind or anything would just slam them. Also, it's 30 degrees and humid, so no wind at all, unless you're outside. So after I got the post, I started walking back down into the hallway from the elevator, only to be met with this. Completely normal looking and everything. I had a song playing in my earphones that was only about 3 minutes long, and it finished by the time I came back up with the post. I am seriously scared. So my cousin and I thought it would be a good idea to visit a ghost town that was located nearby. We had heard stories from other relatives saying that they saw a woman and a daughter in a dress standing or walking by the side of the road. Whenever they passed, their mobile phones would either die or completely lose signal, and one of my cousins said his car stopped working as soon as they passed them. So 7 of us got into a big van and went to the ghost town to see if the paranormal activity was true. We were just talking and laughing in the van, making fun of people who did get scared at the town, and that they were probably just imagining things. None of us had ever been to the ghost town before, and we didn't really know when we would reach it. As we crossed a bridge that led into the ghost town, the scenery completely changed. A huge fog appeared out of nowhere and covered the whole town and the bridge relatively quickly. At that point, the laughter in the van died out, and we were dead quiet because we knew we had entered the ghost town area. We parked the van on a dirt road that was just a little outside of the ghost town entrance. We turned off the car and closed all the windows and just sat there looking into the dark, empty houses. It felt as if the houses were full of ghosts, just looking at the van as if we'd invaded their space. The atmosphere was so tense that after 5 minutes of just sitting there in the dark, the driver of the van suddenly turns the car on and drives out of the town. We all wonder why he left so suddenly, and we ask him, but he wouldn't answer. He parked in a nearby petrol station and his face was extremely pale. He finally started talking and said that he saw a small girl walking behind one of the houses coming towards the van, and he was petrified. You could see him trembling. He ran inside the gas station, and the cashier saw his pale face, and surprisingly, he asked the driver if we had just come back from the ghost town. We told the cashier that we just had, and that the driver had supposedly seen a little girl. The cashier told us that he had passed by the town a few times and saw the same thing. He advised us that if we really wanted to experience something paranormal, we should wash the car down with those little window wash things that they have at the gas station. We thought this was a good idea, so we went outside and washed the car all around. We washed the top of the car, the sides, the doors, and all the windows and all the mirrors. We washed the windows inside the car, and we took paper towels to completely dry the car on the inside and the out. We then sat in the petrol station parking lot for a good 10 minutes, talking to see if we were brave enough to go back or if we were just going to go home. The driver was pretty shaken, so someone else took over and we headed back to the ghost town. We went back onto the dirt road and traveled into the center of the town this time. We sat in the van for 15 minutes just looking out for signs of a girl or any signs of activity in the houses. I can't explain how tense the atmosphere was. There were 7 of us, all aged 17 plus in the van, and we were reduced to holding hands. That is how scared we were. It was weird, but everyone was so scared that we couldn't help it. And after about 20 minutes in the center of town, I had begun to see a figure in the distance. It seemed like the little girl everyone was talking about, but something was odd. It didn't look like she was walking. She was making these odd movements as if she was limping or something. I told everyone to look into the distance, and everyone said they saw her also. We watched her for about 3 to 5 seconds. The figure looked like it was getting up, and we realized that she had been crawling and was beginning to stand up. Right when she stood up, the figure dissolved into blackness and a loud bang hit the driver's side. The gravel beneath the van made sounds as if someone was crawling under the car, and 3 very distinct thumping noises came from under the car. The thumping was directly below my feet, and I could feel something hitting the car. Something also stepped on the back bumper of the van, and a small thump could be heard hitting the back window. I made the decision that we should leave immediately, and so we did. We got to the gas station, everyone got out of the car, and we all saw it. On the driver's side mirror was a fresh handprint. Remember, we had spent the last hour cleaning the whole car, and when we get back with no one leaving, there's a handprint. We were all freaked out. I made my way to the back of the car, and there was a little footprint on the back bumper along with a set of handprints and fingers on the back of the window of the van. We took a paper towel and tried to smear or dry the handprints as footprints and fingerprints, but they just wouldn't come off the car. We sat at the gas station for about 30 minutes just freaking out, and still the prints would not dry. When you touched the prints, they didn't feel wet or anything, but they looked as if they were wet. Everyone was scared to get out the back of the van, but we eventually did. We made sure not to drive the van directly to someone's house because in our culture, something could have clung onto the van and tried to follow us home. So we went to a nearby Walmart. We stayed in the store for about 45 minutes and came out. The prints were still on the van. We had to call someone to get us, and we left the van in a Walmart parking lot until the next day. The prints eventually disappeared, and we took the van back to my cousin's house. I am never going to a ghost town again. My wife and I had just gotten married and decided that we wanted to see Napa, drink wine, and just do married people things. Either way, my mom had offered to let us stay over on the drive down. Some backstory. My mom has lived in the house since I was in junior high. It's a townhouse, so you always hear people next door running up and down the stairs at all hours of the night. So in the middle of this night, I'm awoken to someone pounding up and down the stairs rather loudly, just like always, I think. So I have to use the bathroom. I get up as quietly as I can to not wake my wife, who tends to yell at me when I do, and go upstairs to use the bathroom. When I open the door to the hallway, I notice that the pounding has stopped. I think thank God and proceed to use the bathroom. I close the door, lift the lid, and pee. And as I'm doing this, I hear the stomping starting up again, even louder than before. It seems as if it's coming from right up the stairs and along the hallway. I hear the sink vanity, one of those cheaply made 1980s sets, vibrating with each step. All of a sudden, I hear a step hit the floor. I figure the pounding had woken up my wife or mom. So midstream, I call out, "Just a sec, just a sec." Again, there's a hit at the door and there's a muffled yell. I call out again, "I'll just be a sec." I flush the toilet and open the door to let my mom know that she can use the bathroom. This action only takes like 1 or 2 seconds. Flush, reach, open. There's nothing. No sound, no person, nothing. Not even the pounding. I go back to the guest room and lay down by my wife, and just as my head hits the pillow, there's a pounding up and down the stairs again. I fall asleep nervously, as you can hear when someone goes up the stairs, so there really is no explanation other than someone next door. The next morning, I tell my mother that the crackhead neighbors kept me up last night, pounding up and down the stairs. She looks at me, very puzzled, and then informs me that no one has been living in the other unit. It was sold and the last tenants moved out weeks ago. If I'd have known this yesterday, I'd have probably shat myself. One Halloween, my teacher thought it appropriate to tell us some stories about his paranormal experiences. One of these that really stuck with me was a story he was telling about a farm his family had always lived on and something about his grandfather. Now, here's the good part. He said that last year after class was over and he had finished his tales, one of his students came up to him and asked how his grandfather died. He told her that it was kidney failure. The girl who asked looked at him and said that's what she had suspected. Then she starts asking about the grandfather's appearance. Did he wear overalls? Did he have really long gray hair and facial hair, and did he wear glasses? At this point, the teacher was a bit creeped out and asked why she wants to know. Her response was because as you were telling the story about your grandpa, I saw him standing in the corner of the room, and he wants you to call your grandma. Later that evening, he did call his grandma. She was fine and said that she was happy that Grandpa was still watching over their grandson, but nonetheless, it was still an incredibly creepy experience. An ex of mine had a young son who had a tendency to sit up at night and talk to his imaginary friends. No biggie, kids and their imagination, right? So one day, the girlfriend and I order a pizza, set up a movie, and the kid gets washed for bed. In his bath, I asked him if he was ready to go to sleep, and he said it would be lonely. I asked him why, and he said that his friend had left. So we fast forward about 30 minutes later. I kill the lights in his bedroom and say goodnight. He turns to me with the biggest grin ever and says he's here, he's back. That is when the doorbell rings and I about shit my pants. Turns out it was just the pizza guy. These stories are from my parents' old house. The first being that there were multiple occasions where I fell asleep on the couch and would somehow, without explanation, without anyone else taking me, and without doing it myself, wake up in my room. Not to mention, I would see someone standing at the top of the stairs, and occasionally I'd hear footsteps upstairs when no one was home. I'd always have the feeling that someone else was there. Strangely enough, the person I saw at the top of the stairs was also a lady in white, although she was very young. I'll never forget the night that we moved out because it was one of the scariest things that I can remember. Over the last few days, the footsteps had gotten so bad and so much louder to the point that it sounded like someone was almost running upstairs. It got to the point where I felt brave enough to look, and as my head peered upstairs, I saw some horrifying large black shadow dart into my parents' room as I was home alone. Shortly after, the heavy footsteps started, running around in circles upstairs. I legitimately thought at that point that there must be someone in the house, so I grabbed a bat and ran upstairs. As soon as I hit the top floor, the footsteps stopped abruptly and there was no one there. But not 5 seconds had passed, and I heard a crash in the garage. I was extremely relieved because my mom had likely just gotten home and started to pack the rest of the boxes into her car. I ran downstairs and opened the door to the garage, but my mom wasn't there. The boxes that had previously been stacked very neatly were tossed clear across the room, spread all over the place. As the adrenaline kicked in, I heard footsteps running upstairs and a door slam. That was it. I noped right out of the house and waited on the porch. It was weird because up until that point, whatever was in my house had been non-intrusive and friendly. That was until we decided to move. Ever since that house, I've been really curious about paranormal things. Part of me thinks it was obviously a ghost, but I also want more definitive proof. Ghost TV shows never satisfied this, as they would often comment on something that you couldn't see or verify. I felt it's cold in here. I heard something. Did you see that happen off camera? You get what I mean. So when I went to my friend's house several years later and found everyone playing with a Ouija board, I was pretty excited. I had never seen one before, but I knew how they worked. I joined in, and after talking to two ghosts, it was pretty obvious that one of my friends was moving it. You could see the guy. He had that "I'm a scare everyone" look on his face, so we kicked him off. At this point, I should probably present some backstory. According to my girlfriend, who has a really hard time believing in anything supernatural, her sister has been haunted since she was a child. Everything from seeing a small child run in front of the television multiple times, multiple people seeing the same tall man lurking in the dark, to a light bulb exploding in her bedroom and then the door slamming and locking itself. The light in that room stopped working, and every electrician they hired couldn't figure out what was wrong. At the time of this story, they were in the process of moving out of that house and had basically no furniture left in it. Fortunately for my curiosity and the relevance of this story, she was also in the room. At that point, it was only me and another guy, who I really trusted and knew he wouldn't be moving the planchette around pointlessly, so I asked if there was anything following her that might want to speak. My girlfriend's sister freaked out for a second and made it very clear she did not want to be a part of this at all, but then the planchette moved to yes. We asked her a few more questions. Will you speak to us? Yes. Will you stay with us if she leaves the room? No. How old are you? 9. This question was confusing because according to every person in the family, they had seen a very tall man. Does this mean that she was 9 when you started following her? Yes. At this point, she noped out of that room, and the moment she stepped out, the planchette moved straight to goodbye, and that was it. We couldn't speak to her anymore, but then I had a great idea. Let's take the Ouija board to her house and try it there, I proposed. We convinced the poor girl to come with us on the condition that she would be able to put on her headphones and drown out whatever we were saying, as she didn't want to have anything to do with it. We arrived at the house and set up the board on the small island in the kitchen. We wanted to turn the lights off, so she retreated to the kitchen pantry with another person and turned the lights on in there. Can we speak to the entity we spoke to in the other house? The planchette moved to yes. Are you the same entity that's following her around? Yes. At this point, I wanted proof. I wanted something solid that I could take away from this experience and say, without a doubt, that there is something beyond our understanding and point to this as proof, at least to myself. Will you move something in the room? No. Will you move something if I'm the only person in the room? No. Would you move something if she was the only one here? Yes. And then I had an idea. It was crucial that nobody in the pantry hear what I was about to say, so I said it very quietly. Could you shut the pantry light off? There was a very uncomfortable silence as the other people around me waited to see what happened. The planchette began to move towards yes, but it dragged off the board and towards the pantry. There was a loud slam in the pantry. The lights went out and everyone screamed inside and fell out. The next moment was one of panic, confusion, and at least for me, achievement. Whatever the hell had just happened in that pantry was exactly what I had been looking for. Something real that I could point to and say, this is how I know. After the two had caught their breath, they both told me that there was a wooden board on top of the shelf leaning against the wall. According to them, the board flipped out from the wall and slammed the shelf, flipping it on the floor. If I remember correctly, it hit one of them and left a bruise. They weren't sure how the lights went out though. One possibly is that in a panic to leave the room, one of them bumped against the switch, but the moment had been too chaotic to really tell beyond a doubt why the light switched off. 70% of the group was ready to nope out, but there were a couple of us, including myself, that wanted to bring the board into the room that had the most activity. It was the same room where their light bulb had exploded, the same room that the dogs would never go, and the same room that the children would avoid looking at when they passed. Me and two others decided to use the board there, and upon walking into the room, it felt like a heavy blanket had been laid upon me. It felt like the sinking feeling when the love of your life tells you to go piss off. It was almost hard to breathe, like your bathroom fills up with steam, except it was very cold. Me and the other two sat down and started asking questions, except there was something very different. Before, the planchette had been moving slowly and deliberately across the board, but now it was moving so fast it would almost fly off the board. In fact, at one point it slipped out from under my fingers and kept on going. The last question we managed to ask it was its name. It began to spell out God. At this point, the other two people noped out of the room and left the board immediately. I told it we had to go and moved it to goodbye. When we left the room, we found out that the other girl that had been in the pantry had to leave the house and was throwing up outside. When we asked her why, she said that the air had felt so heavy that she began to get nauseous. This experience was without a doubt the most terrifying and exhilarating of my life. It was exactly what I was looking for and more. One thing stuck with me more than anything else, even more than the slamming board in the pantry, the implications of which still sends a wave of terror down my back at the very thought. Just before I left that room, I asked it if it would be willing to stay with me if she went home. It said yes. As far as the house goes though, they've been moved out for a couple of years now. Every time they had to go back to collect their things, there was a chair that had moved to a different place in the house. At one point it was upstairs, in the same room that we went into, facing the wall. We drove past it a couple of days later. It was in the living room facing the window. A couple of days after that, they opened the garage door and it was dead center facing out. I also note that since they moved out, the house has been sold several times, as it seems that the people who move in tend to quickly move out. Even walking past the house is really unnerving, as all the trees in the front are now dead, whilst all the other trees in the other houses are thriving. It feels almost cliche, but it is very creepy nonetheless. These stories didn't happen to me, but to my grandmother and my mother. Both of them swear by these stories. Over the years, I would ask them to retell them, and they would always be the same. When my mom was a young girl, about age 10 to 16, she lived in a house with my grandma. So my mom's room was upstairs above the kitchen and below the attic. Her and Grandma both claimed to hear strange sounds coming from the attic, but assumed it was just an old house and possibly even rodents. But when my mom became a teenager, she would like to get up at night, sometimes sneak around the house, sometimes go get food, or sneak out with friends. But before then, she would never really leave her room at night. There was one night in particular. She told me that her mouth was extremely dry and it had woken her up. She exits her room and goes downstairs into the kitchen for a drink, but she sees something at the bottom of the stairs. It was a man. He was sitting on the bottom steps, hunched over. My mom froze. She didn't think that he'd heard her, otherwise he would have moved. So she tried to get a better look at him. She said that he was very faintly transparent, but other than that, looked like a solid man. He had dark overalls on, with a worn-out hat. From the side, it looked like he had a beard. My mom started to get creeped out and ran back to her room, occasionally looking back just to make sure he wasn't following her, which he didn't. When she was telling me this 20 years later, she said that the surrounding him was so sad that it had actually scared the shit out of her. My grandma, on the other hand, knew he was there all along. She felt him when they first moved in. She said that every time she would get home from driving my mom to work or school, she would come home and would get this urge to look up at the attic window. He would be standing there just looking out, not at anything in particular. He would be just standing there looking out at nothing. The first few times, my grandma would go upstairs to make sure it wasn't an intruder, but by the time she got there, he would be gone. No footsteps in the dust. She said he was just harmless, but at the same time, he was very eerie. She called him crazy, but never explained why. After years of living with him, his sad aura and walking around, his redecorating habits, his window gazing, my grandma said that one event really stuck. My mom was in her late teens and my grandma had just gotten married. My grandma almost had everything packed and was ready to move, but she couldn't find my mom's baby book. Grandma looked absolutely everywhere, and I mean everywhere, and she couldn't find them. She felt horrible for losing them and said that she just sat on the couch crying over those baby books. So she went upstairs to the bathroom to go wipe her face, and when she came back, she saw what was on the couch and froze. Exactly on the spot where she had just been sitting were the baby books, 4 bulky baby photo albums. She quickly put them in the box and took it out to the car. She said that as they were leaving, she saw the old man in the window. Grandma said that over the years, she came across people that had lived in the house, and when my grandma went to ask, "Can I ask you something about your attic?" they would reply with, "Did you see the old man too? I'm currently living only a block away from that exact house." So I went over and took a picture of it and circled is the window where he stands. The residents now have a curtain in that window, which sucks because I haven't actually seen him, but who knows? So my grandparents parked their old 150-year-old house for sale. They were not home at the time and they left me alone to deal with a real estate agent coming over with a potential buyer later that day. So the real estate agent arrives and brings with her the potential buyer, a very nice Muslim lady and her 2 little girls. But I noticed that one of the little girls was of Indian descent rather than Arabic ethnicity. Funnily enough, she was wearing a Catholic school uniform. It almost looked identical to the uniform I had to wear when I went to pre-primary. It's a bit weird, but whatever. So I let them into my house and the 2 girls walk upstairs. The Indian girl looks at me as she walks up with her hand on the banister and gives me a smile. I went downstairs to open up my uncle's granary flat, and after waiting for them to look around my grandparents' house, I walked down to the granary flat and the little girls run past me. They ran into my little cousin's room and I went in to make sure they weren't messing around with any of my uncle's figurines. The Indian girl was sitting on the bed stroking my cat, whilst the other girl was asking me a really dumb question about some dead hamsters. I decided to stand outside with the keys to look up once they were done, and after about 10 minutes with the mom and the real estate agent, we walk out with a little Arabic girl, and I'm standing there pausing, watching for the little Indian girl to come out so I can set the alarm. The real estate agent looks at me and says, "Why are you waiting? Why don't you just lock the house?" And I reply with, "What?" I'm waiting for the other little girl, obviously. The real estate agent gives me a really funny look. "What other little girl?" I give them a look. "The one with the Catholic uniform?" The potential buyer then looks at me in shock. I only bought one daughter. And at the same time, the real estate agent gestures to the 3 of us. Me, the mom, and the girl. Shit. I went in and scurried the place. There was nothing, and there's nowhere she could have gone or hidden. It turns out that there was no other little girl in Catholic uniform. Not a living one, anyway. The house sat at the very edge of Hollow Ridge, half swallowed by trees, the driveway barely visible through the overgrown brush. It was a two-story colonial style, pale yellow siding faded and cracking, windows caked with dust. It looked forgotten. When I turned the key, the front door creaked open like it hadn't been touched in years. The air was stale, heavy with mildew and something else I couldn't quite place. The floors groaned under my feet. Every room I entered had a strange stillness to it, like the house was holding its breath. The strangest part was the smell. It was faint, like burnt sugar mixed with wet earth. I figured it was mold or maybe old food left behind, but I never found any rot. In fact, the kitchen was spotless. The fridge was unplugged, the cabinets empty. I settled in upstairs in what looked like the guest room. That night, I barely slept. I kept waking up to the sound of creaking, not loud, but deliberate, like footsteps on the staircase. I told myself it was just the house settling, but it didn't stop. On the second day, I explored the attic. There was a small staircase leading up, and I noticed something odd right away. The door at the top was bolted shut from the outside. I called Emily. "Oh," she said, hesitating. "Yeah, Gran always kept that door locked. Said it was unsafe. Don't go up there." "What's unsafe about it?" "She never said. Just leave it alone, okay?" So, of course, I didn't leave it alone. That night, after a few beers, I grabbed a screwdriver and popped the bolt. The stairs creaked as I stepped into the attic, and the smell hit me stronger up there. Burnt sugar and earth, pungent and thick. The attic wasn't full of junk like I expected. Just one thing, a child's rocking horse, set in the middle of the room. It was perfectly clean. No dust. No cobwebs. Just sitting there, slightly facing the door. I left immediately and rebolted the door. Over the next few days, I started hearing whispers. They were soft, like someone talking through a wall just below the threshold of meaning. Sometimes it came from the attic. Other times from the hallway outside my door. One night, I woke up to the sound of the rocking horse. It was creaking, slow, rhythmic. I sat up, heart pounding. It was unmistakable. Creak, creak, and then silence. The next morning, I went to the attic again. The rocking horse had moved. It now faced the corner. I hadn't unbolted the door. At this point, I should have left. I know that. But I didn't have anywhere to go, and something about the house made me feel trapped. Not physically, but emotionally. It was like the longer I stayed, the more I didn't want to leave. On the fifth day, I found a shoebox of old photos in the closet. Most were black and white, creased with age. Pictures of a woman I assumed was Emily's grandmother, a man in a military uniform, and a little girl. The girl appeared in every photo. Same expressionless face, same blank stare, same dress. In the last photo, she was alone, standing in front of the attic door. The door was open and the inside was pitch black. On the back, written in faint pencil, "You can't bury what never left." That night, I had a dream so vivid, I still remember every detail. I was standing in the attic. The rocking horse was moving on its own, and behind it stood the little girl from the photographs. Her face was pale. Her eyes were hollow. She pointed at me and said, "You open the door." I woke up drenched in sweat. My bedroom door was wide open. I had closed it before bed. The walls began to make sounds, scratching, tapping, breathing. Yes, breathing. I would lie in bed and hear it, the subtle rise and fall like the walls themselves had lungs. I'd press my ear against the drywall and hear movement behind it. One time, I heard something laugh. I called Emily again and told her I couldn't stay. There was a long pause before she said, "That house, it changes people." "What do you mean?" "My mom lived there for a while. After Gran died, she left in the middle of the night one day and never talked about it again. I'm sorry I sent you there. I thought maybe it was just in our heads." She started crying. "Please don't go back into the attic." I didn't listen. That night, I took a flashlight and went up again. The rocking horse was gone. In its place was a square cut into the floor like a hidden hatch. I pried it open. A narrow crawl space led downward. The walls were made of stone, old, primitive. I crawled through for what felt like forever until I reached a small room. Inside was a chair, and in that chair sat a figure. It was the girl, or what was left of her. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. But I knew she was aware of me, and then she smiled. Her jaw unhinged wider than any human mouth should. She whispered, "You live here now." I don't remember crawling back. I only remember waking up in the hallway, covered in dust and blood, not mine. I packed my things. I drove 6 hours straight without stopping. When I got home, I turned off my phone, closed every door and window, and refused to talk to anyone for a week. But something followed me. Every night since, I've heard the creaking of a rocking horse outside my room. And I swear, last night, I heard her voice through the vent. "You opened the door." When my dad remarried after my mom died, I was 14. I hated him for it, even though I knew deep down he didn't deserve it. My stepmom, Caroline, was fine, kind, even. But there was something about her I didn't trust. I chalked it up to resentment and teenage bitterness. 3 months after the wedding, they bought a house in a quiet part of Connecticut. Big place. Too big for 3 people. It had 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a massive backyard, and a strange little door in the hallway that led to the one room we were told not to use. Caroline called it the cold room. When I first asked about it, she smiled in that forced adult way and said, "Oh, that room has a draft. It's not insulated well. We just keep the door closed." But I noticed something weird right away. The door was bolted shut from the outside. And even stranger, there were salt lines across the base of the door, like someone had poured salt all along the frame. I only recognized that from a movie I watched with a friend, Something About Spirits. I asked my dad, and he just shrugged. "She's superstitious," he said. "Let it go." So I let it go. For about a week. It started with noises. The first night, it sounded like shuffling. Soft, almost like someone dragging a foot across the floor. Then came the knocking, always at 3:17 a.m. Not before, not after. 3 knocks, then silence. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was the pipes or the house settling, but deep down I knew it was coming from inside that room. One night, I got out of bed and sat outside the door just listening. The air was colder there, no doubt. Not just cool, unnaturally cold. And then I heard it. A whisper, a girl's voice. "Let me out." I didn't tell my dad. I didn't trust Caroline, and I didn't think he'd believe me. So I told my friend Adam when he came over one Saturday. Naturally, he dared me to open the door. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stand being called a coward. So late that night, while they were asleep, we snuck into the hallway with a flashlight and a screwdriver. The bolt was old and loud, and I was sure we'd wake the whole house. When I pushed the door open, the cold hit us like a wave. Inside, the room was almost empty. Just a small wooden bed, a nightstand, and a broken mirror hanging on the opposite wall. But what I remember most was the smell. It wasn't rot. It was sorrow. Like something long forgotten, left to decay emotionally, not physically. Adam stepped inside, but I stayed at the door. That's when the door slammed shut on its own. I heard him scream. When I opened it, he was on the floor, pale and shaking, his nose bleeding. He never told me what he saw in there, and he never came back to my house again. I confronted Caroline the next morning. She didn't deny it. She sat me down in the kitchen, offered me tea like nothing had happened, and told me this: when I was a girl, my sister died. She fell through the ice at a lake near our house. I was the one who dared her to walk on it. She stirred her tea slowly. But my sister didn't stay dead. She followed me. Every house I lived in, every place I went, and she gets stronger when the doors open. I asked her why she didn't get rid of the room. She looked me dead in the eyes. You don't get rid of her. You contain her. Weeks passed. I avoided the hallway. I started wearing headphones to drown out the 317 knocking. But then I found the drawing. It was on my pillow, folded neatly. A child's crayon sketch. It showed a stick figure girl with long hair and black eyes standing over a bed. My bed. In the corner, another stick figure, smaller, curled up in fear. The handwriting at the bottom was that of a child. Shaky and uneven, you open the door. She likes you now. I didn't sleep that night. My father started acting strange. He'd go down to the basement and stay there for hours. He stopped shaving, stopped eating dinner with us. Caroline said he was stressed from work, but I knew better. One night, I followed him. He wasn't in the basement. He was in the cold room, sitting on the edge of the bed, whispering to someone I couldn't see. I saw him hand something to the air. When I stepped into the room, he snapped his head around so fast I thought he'd break his neck. His eyes were completely black. And then he smiled. That night, I packed a bag and ran to Adam's house. His parents were kind and let me stay the night. I didn't tell them everything, just that things were bad at home. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up screaming. In my dream, the girl had crawled into Adam's room, climbed onto the bed, and whispered into my ear, "She doesn't want Caroline. She wants you now." The next morning, there was a voicemail from Caroline. She was crying. The house had caught fire. The firemen found my father's body in the hallway. Caroline survived. The cold room was untouched. Completely untouched. Not even smoke damage. I moved in with an aunt. Caroline disappeared from my life. I never saw her again, and honestly, I was fine with that. But the dreams didn't stop. Always the same time, always the same girl, always the same message, "Let me out." You already did. I'm 27 now. I live in a city. New apartment, new life. I sleep with the lights on, but otherwise I've been okay. Until last night. I came home late, dropped my keys on the counter and saw it, salt. A faint white line across the base of my bedroom door. I didn't put it there. And behind the door, I heard something move. Then 3 knocks. In a whisper I'll never forget, "You're home now."